Hi there, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about the difference between film, as in motion picture, video, and photography. And why I think that these days the boundary between them is so blurred that they are pretty much the same thing. And I know that there'll be some differences of opinion on that. But it's the half-term holidays, so first of all, where are we going, Beth?
Ice skating!
Ice skating. Let's go.
Is the difference of film and photography, where film is just like a video and photograph isn't like, it doesn't move except only if it's not live.
Yeah.
And video is where you can like see things happening.
Right.
Disturbing the peace with some peace of mind. Sleeping in jeans, I'ma need a night. OD on the cheap advice. OC on the cheapest flights. Lately I've been on the move trying to get to something. But I told her I've been running just to see the sights, see the lights, and they're not my types who would chill with a brother if his ice all white, but it's not. Am I living life in a box? Tell if it's a crisis or not. I hate coming off too normal, but I can use a wife and a dog and a job and a white fence off where the white kids walk. Well, if I've been lost, don't know where the days went. I spent a lot of nights in a blur, and I bet it's been a few too many trying to make it. And I haven't yet, yeah. We had to bet. I'm only here, yeah. You know. But if you don't like this music, then don't be listening to it, you know. I'm just a dude that you know, or something similar. If you don't keep it real, can you go somewhere but here? Cause you know we're only losing control. I say if
Okay,
you
so
don't like
did
this
we
music,
enjoy
you
ice
don't
skating?
be listening
Yes!
to it, you know.
Yeah, you were super good today.
I was almost as fast as
Almost.
You don't keep it real,
And then we grabbed a McDonald's, didn't we? And it's time to head home. We'll go pick Amy up.
Oh, we've just been to Meadowhall. We're at Meadowhall.
I've got the iPad fixed. Okay, so after having a bit of fun earlier at the ice skating rink, let's get to what we're actually going to talk about today, which is the differences or the similarities between photography and filmmaking. So we're classing kind of filmmaking as, you know, videography, cinematography, anybody basically who is making films of whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you know, commercial motion picture, that sort of thing. Just anybody who's using a camera to create either moving pictures or still pictures. I'm not going to give you like the whole history of photography. I'm no expert on it. I know the basics, and that's not really what this video is about. But we're just going to go back to like in the 1800s. Basically, photography was created. There was a series of kind of breakthroughs by a number of kind of influential people. Started off with the camera obscura, which was just a hole that kind of let light through. It was basically discovered that it would invert the light, so turn it upside down and project it onto a wall. I mean, it's not going to happen in every situation. Certain things have to kind of be in place, but that's the crux of it. And that was how someone discovered that they could create an image. And that was like the earliest type of photography. And it was from that people started to experiment with different processes to try and capture that image and preserve it so that it could be looked at later. So one of the earlier ones was Joseph Nietzsche, and he's using silver nitrate, chemicals basically, to try and preserve the image that he was placing onto something. That process was called heliography. Now, that wasn't a very refined process, and it wasn't going to ever, you know, be something that could be mass produced. So Nietzsche's partner, Louis Daguerre, he took over Nietzsche's work when he died, and he tried to mass produce the process of capturing the light on something that would take less time and could be produced over and over again. And that's when he produced what became to be known as the daguerreotype, which basically was photographs that ended up being printed on like a mirror. you may have seen some of these. I've seen them in like antique stores and old kind of shops and things like that. That there still are, you know, there still are these photographs lying around on these special mirrors. So a little further down the line, a guy called Henry Fox Talbot, he developed something called the calotype, and that basically is a similar sort of device to the daguerreotype, which allows negatives to be produced of the image. So they're not on like a hard, you know, piece of glass. These are now on like potentially like a paper, which was a big step forward because that meant that, you know, images could be reproduced from that paper, and it would be much easier to make mass produce photographs. Okay, so I said I wasn't going to go too far into the history, so I'm not going to go through every single step. But basically at this point, what we've got is a system where an image can be captured, it can be preserved, and then it's preserved as a negative. So therefore we can now reproduce that image onto other you know, paper, and that's basically what we know today as a photograph, as a print. And from there the process is refined so much more over the years, and the devices became smaller, the devices became more refined themselves, and the process of capturing an image became a lot more user-friendly. I mean, the issue with these early photographs is that people would have to stay still because the exposure times, the time that the shutter was open for was so long in order to capture the image that it wasn't really realistic to, you know, you couldn't capture sports. It was hard even to capture someone smiling sometimes because they'd have to hold the pose for such a long time. And that's why some of the photographs that you see from like way back in the 1800s, you know, they've got very kind of not very much expression in their body or their faces, and they're all stood very still. So that takes us to like 1878, where a guy called Edward Muybridge, he wants to find out if all four of a horse's hooves leave the floor at any one time. And to do so, he uses a series of cameras that he sets up on like a special kind of trigger device and to trigger them consecutively. So what it does by doing this is it actually creates the first motion picture, because once he's taken all of these photos and he puts them into a sequence, he actually has a moving picture of the horse running or galloping. And by doing so, that is the first ever, or what is deemed to be one of the first ever motion pictures as we would know it today. Not long after this, a guy called George Eastman of what company used to be called Eastman Kodak, and is now today known as Kodak, he produced the first ever film roll where you could put a roll of film into a camera, take a series of photos, and then send that roll of film off to be developed, where you sent the camera off. And the first kind of mass-produced consumer camera was called a box brownie, because it was a box that you got sent to you. You took your photos and then you sent the box back, and the film got developed. You got the photos back, and you got another box to be able to take photos on. So then throughout the 1900s, you've got various leaps forward in technology and the process of developing film. But what we've essentially got for a long, long time is everything is produced on film. All images, all photography, all filmmaking, all cinematography, it's all produced on film. So that was all sorts of different types of film, all different sizes of film, from motion pictures to professional photos using sort of large format or medium format cameras, to snapshots on smaller 35mm film, or films on huge rolls of motion pictures produced on huge rolls of film. And obviously the only way to get the images from the film is to develop them, and that process was what kind of slowed down the progression of photography and filmmaking for a number of years, because you always had to have a process of capturing the image and then developing the film, so nothing was instantaneous. So we get to the mid-1970s, and a guy called Steve Sassons has basically produced the first digital camera, Now, this was a device that was an actual camera. There have been all sorts of experimental stuff with capturing images digitally up till then. But that was said to be the first digital camera. Now, it would take another kind of 20 years before companies were properly producing digital cameras. And it'd be another 5 or 10 years before that would be something that people would have, as something that consumers would use to take photographs or capture video with. Okay, so that was no means a detailed history of film and photography. But what I wanted to explain is that about 150, 200 years ago, we didn't capture images. As humans, we didn't know how to capture an image and preserve it. And it took a long time. If you look at the period of time that it took to be able to refine the process to what it is today, where we capture images digitally on cameras, we have tiny little cameras in our pockets, in our phones. If you look at the sort of how technology has come on in the last 20 years, compared to like the 150 years before that, it's just incredible. And that's where I think that the boundaries, the lines are so blurred now between, photography, still image capture and moving image capture. And having come into this, later on in life, as a kind of, more of an enthusiast and a professional, I haven't grown up with film. I haven't learned how to capture images or process them using rolls of film. As a kid, I took pictures on film, and I took them to local booths, and I got them processed, and then I got my pictures and my negatives. But what I mean is, now I do this for a living, and so I capture a lot of images, and I have to process a lot of images. I've only really ever known that from a digital perspective. So my point being that these days, I hear people talking about photography, and I hear people talking about filmmaking, and they talk about them so separately. There's a tendency to sort of say, no, I'm a photographer or I'm a filmmaker, and I've never seen it like that. And I'm the last few years that I've been doing this, the reason I don't see it like that is because they're the same. I use the same cameras, the same lenses, the same accessories in order to capture a photograph or a video. I use similar composition techniques. I use similar lighting techniques. Obviously, I don't need to worry about capturing audio as a photographer if I'm taking still images, but I still want to be able to tell a story through my still images in the same way as I would with moving images. Now, yes, there are always going to be differences, and what you would do with video, what you would do with moving image, compared to what you might do with still image, is going to always be slightly different. You can't, at the moment, have a magazine or a newspaper with moving images in it. Who knows? One day, in the not too distant future, people might have magazines with tiny little screens in with moving images. But so I get that there are still forms of photography that will stay as still image. But I just think that if you're a photographer and you're worried about video and how to get into capturing, video and making films, there isn't really the same kind of worry or restriction or hurdle to get over as there once was. So basically what I'm saying is I think that the kind of difference between film and photography and the lines between them has never been as small, and they are pretty much the same thing. And when I'm doing work for people now, I am usually in a lot of occurrences, I'm actually capturing both photos and video for them. And I do think that it's possible to do that in a professional and high quality way. That's not me saying I'm the best photographer or the best filmmaker. I'm not. What I'm saying is that if you know how to take good photos, then you can probably capture a good moving image too, and vice versa. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you want to leave a comment, that'd be great. I'd love to hear what your sort of views on it are. And if you want to see more videos like this, they won't all be like this. I'm just sort of starting out here, so I'm going to refine the process of doing this and hopefully get better at it. But yeah, please subscribe if you want to see some more, and like the video if you think other people might want to see it. Cheers. Right, see you later.